The vampire king Elion Pellinore had read the message 999 times when he decided he might be losing what remained of his mind. The text glowed softly in the darkness of his study, a room lined with books older than most nations and windows sealed against any possibility of dawn. His phone, an absurd modern concession he'd resisted for decades, sat in his pale palm like a tiny window into warmth he had no right to touch. The message was simple, devastatingly so. "Goodnight. I think I'm falling asleep." Nothing more. The sentence cut off mid-word, and Elion knew exactly what had happened. She'd fallen asleep texting him, her phone probably still clutched in her hand, her breathing evening out into the soft rhythm of dreams. He'd watched her through video calls enough times to imagine it perfectly. Julia Hayes curled on her side, dark hair spilling across her pillow, lips slightly parted, the tension she carried through her waking hours finally smoothed from her features. He read it for the 1,000th time. The incompleteness of it shouldn't have mattered. He could fill in the missing letters himself. But there was something unbearably human about the way it ended, something that spoke of vulnerability and trust and the ordinary miracle of a body surrendering to sleep. She'd been talking to him, thinking of him, and exhaustion had simply taken her mid-thought. For a creature who controlled one of the three great vampire courts of the modern world, who had lived through the fall of Rome and the rise of the digital age, who commanded absolute loyalty from thousands of immortals, Elion found himself helpless before 11 words and an unfinished 12th. He set the phone down on the desk with deliberate care, stared at it for exactly 4 seconds, and picked it up again. This was pathetic. He was ancient. He was powerful. He did not obsess over text messages like some lovesick boy. Except he did, apparently, because his thumb was already scrolling up through their conversation history, rereading words he'd memorized weeks ago. Their correspondence had begun 6 months earlier, entirely by accident. Julia worked night shifts at a 24-hour diner, and she'd found a wallet left behind in a booth. The business card inside had listed only a name, Elion Pellinore, and a phone number. She'd texted rather than called, a simple message. "Found your wallet at Rosie's Diner on 5th. I'm here until 6 a.m. if you want to pick it up." He'd sent someone to retrieve it, of course. He rarely ventured into public spaces, especially not brightly lit diners full of humans. But he'd sent a thank you text himself, brief and formal. "Appreciated." Her response had surprised him. "That's it? Just appreciated? Not even a full sentence with a subject and verb?" He'd stared at that message for 5 full minutes before replying, "Thank you. Better. You're learning." And somehow, impossibly, it had continued. She worked late nights. He kept late hours by nature and necessity. She'd text him during her shift's observations about customers, complaints about her manager, questions about nothing in particular. He responded sparingly, carefully, with single words or short sentences that somehow always seemed to delight her. "Do you ever sleep?" she had asked once. "Rarely." "Me neither? Insomnia or choice?" "Both." "Same." "What do you do all night?" "Work." "What kind of work?" "Administrative." "That's impressively vague. Are you in the mob?" "No." "That's exactly what someone in the mob would say." "True." She'd sent a laughing emoji, and Elion had caught himself almost smiling at his phone in the middle of a council meeting. Lucian Corvinus, his second in command, had noticed and raised one elegant white eyebrow, but said nothing. Lucian was wise that way. The texts had become routine, expected, necessary if Elion was honest with himself, which he tried not to be. She'd send him rambling messages about rude customers or interesting conversations she'd overheard. He'd respond with single words that somehow kept the conversation flowing. She seemed to understand his silences, reading meaning in his brevity that others missed. "You're a man of few words," she'd texted once. "Yes, I like it. Most people talk too much, say nothing with 1,000 words. You say everything with one." He'd stared at that message for an hour before responding. "Perceptive. Was that a compliment?" "I think that was a compliment. I'm counting it." Over months the conversations had deepened. She told him about her family parents who'd passed away when she was 19, a brother she rarely spoke to, dreams of going back to school but never having enough money. He'd told her almost nothing, yet somehow she'd learned him anyway. She understood when his single-word responses meant amusement versus concern versus the rare vulnerability he couldn't quite hide. "Bad day?" she had asked once, after he'd taken hours to respond to a simple question. "Yes." "Want to talk about it?" "No." "Want distraction?" "Yes." She'd spent the next hour sending him photos of the worst fashion choices of late-night diner customers, complete with running commentary. He'd read every word, and the tightness in his chest, the weight of council politics and blood laws and endless responsibility, had eased slightly. He'd fallen for her slowly, then all at once. Elion Pellinore, vampire king, ancient and powerful and perpetually alone, had fallen completely in love with a human woman he'd never properly met. They'd video-called exactly 3 times, always at her instigation. She'd wanted to make sure he was real, not some elaborate catfish. He'd made certain those calls happened in his study, with careful lighting that wouldn't reveal quite how pale his skin was, how colorless his hair appeared in certain angles. She'd been beautiful on screen, brown eyes bright with humor, smile quick and genuine, voice warm enough to feel like sunlight. "You're real," she'd said during that first call, sounding relieved and delighted. "Did you doubt it?" "A little. You're very mysterious." "I prefer private." "Is there a difference?" "Yes." She'd laughed, and the sound had done something dangerous to his long, dead heart. But he'd kept her at arm's length nonetheless. No meetings in person, no real details about his life, nothing that would draw her into his world, into danger she couldn't understand. Because Julia Hayes was human, gloriously and fragilely human, and Elion's world devoured humans who came too close. The Midnight Court. His court was the most progressive of the 3 great vampire houses. They believed in coexistence, in carefully maintained balance between vampire and human societies. But progressive didn't mean safe. The other 2 courts, the Crimson Assembly and the Obsidian Circle, viewed humans as prey at worst and resources at best. And within his own court, there were factions that would use any perceived weakness against him. A human woman he cared for would be the perfect leverage, the perfect target. So he'd loved her from a distance, through screens and text messages, allowing himself only these small scraps of connection. It was safer this way, smarter. She could live her human life, untouched by the darkness of his existence, while he hoarded their conversations like treasure. Elion read the half-finished text again. "Goodnight. I think I'm falling asleep." Falling asleep, obviously, but his mind caught on the words before that last unfinished one. "I think I'm falling." The sentence worked on its own, incomplete as it was. An accidental confession, probably meaningless, certainly unintentional. He was reading too much into it. This was what happened when a vampire king spent 6 months communicating primarily through text message with a woman who'd somehow slipped past every defense he'd spent centuries building. This was what happened when loneliness finally caught up with eternity. His phone buzzed. Elion's attention snapped to it immediately, hope flaring sharp in his chest. But it wasn't Julia. It was Lucian. "Council meeting in 10 minutes. The Crimson Assembly has made another territorial claim. Your presence is required." Elion typed back. "Arriving shortly." He glanced at Julia's message one more time, then forced himself to set the phone down and leave it there. He had responsibilities, a court to run, political maneuvering to manage. He couldn't spend all night fixated on a text message from a human who probably thought of him as nothing more than an interesting pen pal. The council chamber was deep beneath the city, in a network of tunnels and rooms that predated modern London by centuries. The Midnight Court had established itself here long before the current city rose above them, and Elion had claimed leadership 200 years ago, after the previous king had grown tired of existence and walked into dawn. The council consisted of 12 vampires, all ancient, all powerful, all watching him with varying degrees of loyalty and ambition as he entered. Elion took his seat at the head of the obsidian table without preamble. "Report," he said simply. Lucian stood, white hair gleaming in the chandelier light, crimson eyes sharp. "The Crimson Assembly has claimed the Docks District. They're arguing that since most shipping now happens at night, it falls under vampire territory rather than neutral ground." "Their argument is absurd," said Cassia Dreven. one of his oldest allies. The docks were established as neutral territory in the Treaty of 1847. They cannot simply claim them because commerce hours have shifted. They can argue anything they want, said Marius Thornwood, who led the more traditional faction of the court. The question is whether we're willing to fight over it. We will not fight, Elion said quietly. Every head turned toward him. We will negotiate. Negotiate? Marius's tone dripped skepticism. The Crimson Assembly respects only strength. Then we will negotiate from strength. Elion's voice remained soft, but power hummed beneath the words. We will remind them that the Midnight Court controls the financial district, and we can make their modern assets extremely uncomfortable if they insist on violating treaty terms. Economic warfare, Lucian nodded approvingly. More effective than blood feud and less likely to draw human attention. The council debated strategy for the next hour. Elion participated with his usual quiet authority, speaking rarely but decisively. His mind, however, kept drifting to his phone upstairs. Had Julia woken yet? Would she text him good morning as she usually did after her shifts? He forced his attention back to the discussion. Cassia was outlining a proposal for reinforcing their territorial boundaries when Elion's phone buzzed in his pocket. He never brought his phone to council meetings. Never. Yet tonight he'd slipped it into his jacket without thinking, and now it was buzzing against his ribs, and every instinct screamed at him to check it. Sire? Cassia had paused, waiting for his response to something he hadn't heard. Continue, Elion said smoothly. Your proposal has merit. The phone buzzed again. Not a text, a call. Julia never called. She texted, respecting his stated preference for written communication. If she was calling, something was wrong. Elion stood abruptly. We will reconvene tomorrow night. Lucian, draft the proposal we discussed and send it to the Crimson Assembly through proper channels. He was moving toward the door before anyone could respond, vampire speed carrying him through the corridors faster than human eyes could track. Behind him, he heard Marius mutter something about unprecedented behavior, but Elion didn't care. The phone was buzzing a third time, and dread had lodged itself in his throat like a blade. He answered as he reached his study. Julia? Is this Elion Pellinore? The voice was female, but not Julia's, older, strained with stress. Yes. Where is Julia? My name is Sandra Torres. I'm a nurse at St. Catherine's Hospital. Julia Hayes had you listed as her emergency contact. She was brought in about an hour ago. The world stopped. Elion's hand tightened on the phone, and he heard the faint crack of the case beginning to give under pressure. He carefully loosened his grip. What happened? There was an incident at her workplace. She's stable now, but she's been injured. Can you come to the hospital? I'll be there immediately. He ended the call. For one moment, Elion stood frozen in his study, 1,000 thoughts cascading through his ancient mind. She'd listed him as her emergency contact. Why? They'd never even met in person. And she was hurt. She was in a hospital, injured, and he'd been sitting in a council meeting worrying about territorial disputes while she, Elion, moved. He pulled on a long coat, gloves, a wide-brimmed hat that would shield his face. Dawn was still hours away, but hospitals were always bright, and he couldn't afford to draw attention. He texted Lucian as he headed for his car. Handle council matters until I return. Personal emergency. Lucian's response came immediately. Understood. Do you need assistance? No. The drive to St. Catherine's took 12 minutes. Elion spent every second of it rigid with fear he hadn't felt in centuries. What kind of incident? How badly was she hurt? Who had hurt her, and did Elion need to kill them? That last thought should have concerned him. He was not prone to violence, had spent his reign minimizing bloodshed rather than glorifying it. But the idea of someone harming Julia triggered something primordial in him, something that predated civilization and morality. She was his. He'd claimed her in his heart months ago, even if he'd never spoken it aloud, even if she didn't know. And someone had hurt her. St. Catherine's lobby was mercifully dim, lit more by monitors than overhead lights. Elion approached the reception desk, and the woman behind it looked up with practiced sympathy. I'm here for Julia Hayes, he said. I received a call. Are you family? I'm her emergency contact. The receptionist checked her computer. She's in room 347. Take the elevator to the 3rd floor. Turn left. Elion followed the directions with forced calm. Inside, everything in him screamed to simply find her scent and track her, to move with vampire speed through these halls until he reached her. But he was in public, surrounded by humans, monitored by cameras. He had to be careful. Room 347's door was partially open. Elion paused outside it, gathering himself. He could hear her heartbeat, steady and strong, and some of the fear eased. Then he heard her voice, weak but unmistakably hers, talking to someone inside. "I already told the police everything. It was just a robbery, wrong place, wrong time. You were lucky. That was the nurse, probably Sandra Torres. A few inches to the left but it wasn't. I'm fine. Just need some rest." Elion pushed the door open. Both women looked up. Julia was in the hospital bed, her left arm bandaged, a bruise blooming across her cheekbone, but alive. So beautifully, wonderfully alive. Her eyes widened. Elion! His name and her voice was everything. He crossed to her bedside in 3 strides, then stopped, uncertain. He wanted to touch her, to verify she was real and breathing, but they'd never touched before, never been in the same room. "You came," she whispered. "You're hurt." "It's not that bad. I didn't think you'd actually come. I wasn't sure you'd—" She stopped, searching his face. "You look exactly like your photos, except paler. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." The nurse cleared her throat. "I'll give you two some privacy. Julia, press the call button if you need anything." Then they were alone. Elion stood beside her bed, hands clenched in his coat pockets, trying to remember how to breathe despite not needing to. "What happened?" he asked. Julia sighed. "Guy came into the diner about an hour after my shift should have ended, demanded money from the register. My manager had already left, and it was just me and one cook. I gave him the money. I'm not stupid, but he was high on something, paranoid. He thought I was stalling, calling the cops." She touched the bandage on her arm carefully. "He had a knife. I got between him and Carlos, the cook. It's just a cut. Looks worse than it is. You got between an armed man and someone else." Elion heard his voice come out flat, emotionless. It was the only way to keep the rage contained. "Carlos has 3 kids. You could have been killed, but I wasn't." She met his eyes, and something in her gaze softened. "You were worried about me. Obviously. You drove to the hospital in the middle of the night. You were hurt. Elion." She reached out with her uninjured hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it. Her fingers were warm, alive, impossibly fragile in his pale grip. "Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would. I didn't think you'd want to." "Why wouldn't I want to?" "Because you keep yourself so separate, so private. I've always felt like you were holding yourself at a distance, like there was this line you wouldn't cross." She squeezed his hand gently. "I respected it, but I also wondered if I was imagining our connection, if maybe you just answered my texts out of politeness." "No." The word came out more forcefully than intended. "Not politeness." "Then what?" Elion looked at their joined hands. He should tell her the truth, all of it. But the words stuck in his throat, weighted down by centuries of secrecy, by the very real dangers that would come with revelation. "I value our correspondence," he said finally. "I value you. I value you too." She smiled, though it looked pained. "Even if you do communicate primarily in single words. You don't seem to mind. I don't. I've gotten good at reading you. Like tonight when you didn't text back, I wondered if something was wrong. That's actually why I was still at work. I was on my phone, checking for messages when I should have been closing up." She paused. "I fell asleep texting you last night. Did you see?" "Yes." "Was it weird?" "It felt weird when I woke up and saw the half-finished message, like I'd left you hanging mid-sentence." "It wasn't weird." "You sure? Because I basically fell unconscious in the middle of saying goodnight. That's got to be some kind of conversation faux pas." Elion almost told her then. Almost admitted he'd read that incomplete message 1,000 times, that he'd memorized every word, that the intimate casualness of her falling asleep while talking to him had undone something in his chest he didn't know how to repair. Instead, he said, "I understood." "Of course you did. You always seem to understand, even when I barely understand myself." She yawned, then winced. "Sorry. Painkillers kicking in. You should rest. Will you stay, just for a little while?" Her eyes were already drifting closed. I know you're busy. I know you have your mysterious administrative work. But if you could stay just until I fall asleep, I'd, I'd really like that. I'll stay, she smiled, still not opening her eyes. Good. That's good. I feel safer with you here. Isn't that strange? We've known each other 6 months and never met until tonight. But I feel safer. Elion sat in the chair beside her bed, still holding her hand. He watched her breathing even out, watched the tension leave her features as sleep claimed her. In the dim hospital room light, she looked impossibly young, impossibly vulnerable. He'd been telling himself for months that distance kept her safe, that by remaining separate from her life, by limiting their relationship to text messages and brief video calls, he was protecting her from his world. But she'd been hurt tonight, she'd been in danger, and his self-imposed distance had meant he'd nearly missed it. If she hadn't listed him as an emergency contact, a gesture that still made something tight and warm curl in his chest, he might not have known until she texted him casually the next day. She might have downplayed it, laughed it off, and he would have believed her because he wasn't there, because he'd chosen absence over presence in the name of safety. What if the robber had been more violent? What if Julia had been killed while Elion sat in his underground council chamber, congratulating himself on keeping her at arm's length? The thought was unbearable. Elion sat in that hospital chair until the sky outside began to lighten. He left only when dawn's approach made staying dangerous, and even then, he had to force himself to release her hand. He texted her from the car. Had to leave before you woke. We'll check on you soon. Her response came 3 hours later. Thank you for staying. It meant everything. He read it 30 times. Over the next week, Elion tried to return to his careful distance. He texted Julia as usual, asked about her recovery, kept his responses brief. But something had broken in him that night at the hospital. The wall he'd built between them had developed cracks, and pretending otherwise was becoming impossible. How's the arm? He texted. Better. Stitches come out next week. How's the mysterious administrative work? Complicated. Tell me about it. I'm bored and off work until the doctor clears me. I could use the distraction. Nothing interesting to tell. Liar. You're the most interesting person I know and also the most secretive. It's a fascinating combination, is it? Very much so. I have theories about you, you know. Do you? Want to hear them? Sure. Theory 1. You're secretly a vampire. That would explain the night hours, the paleness, the general air of gothic mystery. Elion stared at his phone. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. He typed, perceptive, then deleted it, typed, ridiculous, deleted that too. Finally settled on, creative theory. I thought so. Theory 2, you're a writer. Antisocial, nocturnal, probably working on some epic novel you'll never show anyone, not a writer. Theory 3, you're in witness protection. No, you're very quick to deny that one. Suspicious. Theory 4, you're just a private person who works strange hours and happens to be an excellent listener who texts in complete sentences and makes me feel less alone during long night shifts. Elion's chest tightened. That one. Thought so. I like that theory best anyway. The others would be interesting, but this one is real, he wanted to tell her. The urge was becoming overwhelming. She deserved to know what he was, deserved to make an informed choice about whether to keep him in her life. But telling her meant exposing her to his world, and his world was dangerous in ways she couldn't imagine. The Crimson Assembly was still pushing territorial boundaries. Marius's faction in his own court was grumbling about Elion's progressive policies. And there were always threats from the Obsidian Circle, whose idea of human-vampire relations involved significantly more violence than Elion permitted. But Julia had been hurt, and he'd almost missed it. The thought kept circling back, relentless. That night, Lucian cornered him in the study. You've been distracted. I'm handling council business appropriately. That's not what I said. Lucian settled into the chair across from Elion's desk, movements elegant and precise. I said you're distracted. Your mind is elsewhere. Elion said nothing. The human woman from the hospital, Lucian continued, the one you listed as an emergency contact. She listed me as hers. Interesting reversal. And you went to her immediately when she was hurt. Is there a point to this conversation? You care for her. It wasn't a question. Elion met Lucian's gaze steadily. Yes, that's dangerous, sire. I'm aware. If the other courts discover, I know. Elion's voice went cold. Do you think I haven't considered every possible consequence, every way this could endanger her? Lucian leaned back, studying him. What will you do? Nothing. I'll do nothing. She'll remain in her life, I'll remain in mine, and we'll continue as we have been. That seems to be working well for you. The sarcasm was gentle but pointed. Elion glared at his second-in-command, who remained unruffled. You read her last message 1,000 times, Lucian said softly. Cassia mentioned seeing you staring at your phone during council meetings. You left mid-session to go to the hospital. Your point? My point is that you've already crossed the line you're so determined to maintain. You've let her in. The only person who doesn't know it is her. It's safer that way. Is it? She was hurt, and you weren't there? Distance didn't protect her from the violence of the human world. What makes you think it will protect her from ours? The question hit exactly where it was meant to. Elion looked away. If I claim her openly, she becomes a target. She may already be one, Lucian's tone gentled. You've been checking your phone constantly for months. You leave council meetings early. You're distracted during negotiations. People notice these things. If we've noticed, others may have as well. Then I'll end it, stop responding, distance myself completely. Will you? Elion didn't answer. They both knew he wouldn't. He'd tried. He'd told himself every night that he should stop, should let the correspondence fade, should protect Julia by cutting her out of his life entirely. But then she'd text him something funny about a customer, or ask his advice about whether to go back to school, or send him a photo of the sunrise with the message, "Wish you could see this?" And he'd respond. Always he'd respond. There's another option, Lucian said carefully, which is, tell her the truth, all of it. Let her decide. And if she runs, then you have your answer. But if she doesn't, if she stays, then at least she'll be prepared for what association with you means. You can protect her properly, instead of from a distance. Elion wanted to argue, but he couldn't find the words. Because Lucian was right. The distance wasn't working. It wasn't keeping Julia safe, and it wasn't easing the constant ache in Elion's chest. He was the king of the Midnight Court. He'd faced down challenges from ancient vampires, negotiated treaties with hostile factions, led his people through centuries of change. But the thought of telling one human woman the truth about himself terrified him more than any political threat. I'll consider it, he said finally. Lucian stood. For what it's worth, sire, I think she'll surprise you. After Lucian left, Elion pulled up his message thread with Julia. She'd sent him something an hour ago. Carlos came by today. Brought flowers and a card signed by everyone at the diner. It was sweet. Made me cry a little. Is it weird that I wanted to text you immediately when it happened? He typed. Not weird. Her response came quickly. Good. Because you're kind of my favorite person to talk to. Is that okay? Yes. Just yes? Not going to elaborate? You're my favorite person to talk to as well. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, that might be the sweetest thing anyone has ever said to me. Even with your minimalist communication style, especially with it. Exactly. You don't waste words. So when you say something, it means more. Elion stared at the screen. His thumbs moved before he could overthink it. I need to tell you something, not over text, in person. The typing indicator appeared immediately. Okay, when? Are you free tomorrow night? I'm off work all week, remember? Doctor's orders. I'm free whenever. I'll come to you. 8 p.m., my apartment, I'll text you the address. Is this the mysterious revelation where you tell me you're secretly a vampire? Elion's heart would have stopped if it still beat. Something like that. Intriguing. I'll be ready. He set down the phone with shaking hands. There was no taking it back now. In 24 hours, Julia would know the truth, and everything would change. Elion spent the day preparing. He met with Lucian and Cassia, briefing them on the situation in case anything went wrong. He arranged for additional security around Julia's apartment building, discreet, invisible to human eyes, but enough to handle any threat. He contacted his oldest ally in the human government, a woman who knew about vampires and helped maintain the careful balance between their worlds, and asked her to have emergency resources on standby. Then, he stood in his study, staring at his reflection in a darkened window, and wondered if he was making a catastrophic mistake. He looked like what he was, a vampire. Centuries of existence had refined him into something not quite human. His skin was too pale, luminous in certain lights. His hair was white as snow, though he'd been turned young. His eyes were gray, but in certain moods they reflected light like an animal's. He moved with inhuman grace. He was cold to the touch. Julia had seen him only once, in a dim hospital room, stressed and distracted by her own injury. Would she see the truth immediately when he stood in her doorway? Would she look at him and know he was something other? At 7:30, Elion left his underground estate. He drove to Julia's address, a modest apartment building in a safe neighborhood. The security he'd arranged was in place, invisible but present. He could sense them, 3 vampires from his personal guard, positioned at strategic points around the block. He knocked on her door at precisely 8 p.m. Julia answered almost immediately. She was wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her injured arm still bandaged but moving more easily than it had in the hospital. Her hair was down, and she smiled when she saw him, bright and genuine and utterly disarming. "You're punctual," she said. "You say that like it surprises you." "Everything about you surprises me." She stepped back, gesturing him inside. "Come in, fair warning. My apartment is tiny and nothing like what you're probably used to." Elion entered cautiously. The apartment was indeed small, a studio with a kitchen area, a living space with a couch and TV, and a bedroom separated by a half wall. But it was warm. There were plants on the windowsill, books stacked on every surface, photographs on the walls. It felt lived in and human, and so completely Julia that Elion felt something in his chest crack further. "Can I get you anything?" she asked. "I have tea, coffee, water. I wasn't sure what you'd want." "Nothing, thank you." She nodded and sat on the couch, tucking her legs under her. Elion remained standing, suddenly uncertain. How did one begin this conversation? "Hello, I'm a vampire, and I've been lying to you for 6 months." "You're nervous," Julia said softly. "I've never seen you nervous before. Even in the hospital you were controlled, calm. But right now, you're nervous. Observant. One of my few talents." She patted the couch beside her. "Sit. Whatever you need to tell me, it'll be easier if you're not looming over there looking like you're about to bolt." He sat, keeping careful distance between them. Julia angled toward him, expression open and patient. "Before you start," she said, "I want you to know that nothing you say is going to scare me off. I don't know what secret you've been keeping, but I know you. 6 months of late-night conversations, remember? I know you're kind. I know you're thoughtful. I know you listen and you care and you make me feel less alone. Whatever else there is, that's the foundation." Her words settled something in him. Elion took a breath he didn't need and began. "You were joking the other day about me being a vampire." He met her eyes. "You weren't entirely wrong." Julia blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" "I'm a vampire. That's the truth I've been keeping from you." Silence. Julia stared at him, expressions cycling through confusion, disbelief, and then something that might have been concern. "Elion," she said carefully, "if this is some kind of metaphor, it's not." He pulled off one glove, then the other. His hands were corpse pale, veins faint beneath translucent skin. "I'm a vampire. I've been alive for 473 years. I'm the king of the Midnight Court, one of 3 major vampire factions in the modern world. I drink blood to survive, I can't go out in sunlight, and I'm significantly stronger and faster than any human." Julia continued to stare. Then she laughed a short, nervous sound. "Okay, this is elaborate. Is someone filming this? Is this a prank?" "No, because vampires aren't real. They're myths, stories. We're real. We've been real for millennia. We've simply gotten better at staying hidden." "Right, and you're their king." "Yes." "Do you have fangs?" Elion hesitated, then smiled slightly, letting his canines extend. They were sharp, longer than human teeth, designed for piercing veins. Julia made a small sound, scrambling back on the couch. Oh my God, those are real." "I'm not going to hurt you." Elion pulled his canines back in, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Julia, I would never hurt you. She was breathing fast, eyes wide, but she hadn't screamed, hadn't run. This is insane. This is actually insane. I know. You're telling me that vampires are real, that you're a vampire, that you've been texting me for 6 months and you're some kind of vampire royalty. That's an accurate summary. Why? The question came out sharp. Why tell me? Why now? Because you were hurt. The words spilled out before Elion could stop them. Because I've been keeping distance between us, telling myself it was to protect you, but when you were in danger, I almost missed it. Because I've been lying to you for months, and if you're going to be part of my life, if I'm going to be part of yours, you deserve to know the truth. Part of your life, Julia repeated. What does that mean? It means I care for you, more than I should, more than is wise. Elion forced himself to meet her eyes. I've read your messages hundreds of times. I think about you constantly. You've become essential to me in a way I didn't anticipate and can't seem to control. Julia's hand went to her mouth. You have feelings for me? Yes. And you're a vampire? Yes. This is the weirdest, most impossible conversation I've ever had. She stood abruptly, pacing the small apartment. Elion remained seated, watching her process. Prove it. Prove you're actually a vampire and not just, I don't know, having some kind of break with reality. How would you like me to prove it? I don't know. Do something vampiric. Elion considered. Then he stood and moved, not walking, but using the speed that was his birthright. One moment he was on the couch. The next he was across the room, then beside her, then back where he started, all in the space between heartbeats. Julia made a strangled sound. What the hell? Vampire speed. Would you like another demonstration? No, that's sufficient. She sat down hard on the couch. You're really a vampire. Vampires are real. Yes? And you've been texting me for 6 months while being a vampire king. Yes. Why me? Why did you keep talking to me after I returned your wallet? What could a vampire king possibly want with a night shift diner waitress? The genuine confusion in her voice made Elion's chest ache. He sat beside her again, closer this time. Because you were funny, because you were kind, because you texted me observations about the world that made me see things differently, because your messages became the best part of my night. I'm human. I'm aware. Doesn't that matter? In your world. It matters tremendously. Elion's voice went grim. There are 3 vampire courts. Mine, the Midnight Court, believes in coexistence with humans. The other 2 are less progressive. And even within my court, there are factions that would see you as a weakness. A target. Julia turned to look at him fully. Is that why you kept your distance? Why we never met? Yes. I thought if I kept you separate from my world, you'd be safe. But I got hurt anyway. Yes. And that changed things. Yes. Elion reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. It was warm and alive in his cold grip. I can't promise you safety. I can't promise you a normal life. Being associated with me means danger you never asked for. But I can promise you honesty from now on. I can promise you that I will do everything in my power to protect you. And I can promise you that what I feel for you is real. Julia looked at their joined hands. This is crazy. Completely. I should tell you to leave. I should call someone, report this, something. You should. But I'm not going to. She met his eyes, and there was steel beneath the fear. Because as insane as this is, I believe you. And because I've spent 6 months falling for someone I thought I'd never really know. Now you're here, telling me the truth, a truth that's absolutely impossible, and somehow it makes sense. All the pieces fit. The night hours, the paleness, the way you always seemed separate from normal life. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, but not of you. She squeezed his hand. I'm afraid of what this means. I'm afraid of the danger you mentioned. But you? Elion, I've known you for 6 months. I know your heart. Vampire or not, that hasn't changed. Something in Elion's chest loosened, a tension he'd been carrying since he'd made the decision to tell her. You're extraordinary. I'm a diner waitress who just found out vampires are real. I'm pretty sure that's the opposite of extraordinary. No. He lifted her hand, pressing it against his chest where a heart no longer beat. You're everything." Julia's breath caught. They sat like that for a long moment, her hand against his chest, his covering hers, the impossible truth hanging between them. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "That depends on you. If you want me to leave, to disappear from your life, I will. If you want time to process this, to decide what you're comfortable with, I'll give you space. Or, or, or you let me stay. You let me be part of your life properly, not just through text messages. And I'll introduce you to my world slowly, carefully, making sure you're protected." "Protected how?" "I've already assigned guards around your building. You won't see them, but they're there. If you agree to this to us, I'll increase security. I'll make sure every vampire in the city knows you're under my protection. It won't eliminate all danger, but it will significantly reduce it." Julia nodded slowly. "Guards. Vampire guards." "Yes." "This is so weird." "I'm aware," she laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "I need a minute. This is a lot." "Take all the time you need." Julia stood, walking to the window. She looked out at the night, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Elion waited, patient and still, while she processed. "I have questions," she said eventually. "I'll answer them." "Do you kill people?" "No, I haven't killed a human for over 2 centuries. I feed from willing donors who are compensated and treated well." "Do you sleep?" "Yes, during the day, but it's more like hibernation than human sleep." "Can you die?" "Yes, sunlight, fire, decapitation. A stake through the heart is mostly myth painful, but not fatal." "Do you age?" "No, I look as I did when I was turned at age 28. Julia turned from the window. "When you say you have feelings for me, what does that mean exactly?" Elion stood, moving to her slowly. "It means I think about you constantly. It means your messages are the highlight of my existence. It means that when you were hurt, I felt fear I haven't experienced in centuries. It means I want to be part of your life in every way you'll allow." "Love?" The word hung between them. Elion had lived for nearly 5 centuries. He'd loved before, though rarely. He knew what it felt like, and he knew what he felt for Julia qualified. "Yes," he said simply. Julia's eyes filled with tears. "I fell asleep texting you goodnight. That incomplete message you got, I was exhausted after my shift, lying in bed, and I was texting you because talking to you is the most comfortable part of my day. I fell asleep mid-sentence because I felt safe, because you make me feel safe." "Julia, I've been falling for you too, for months, and I kept telling myself it was stupid, that we barely knew each other, that it was just texts and a few video calls. But it didn't feel stupid. It felt real." She stepped closer to him. "This you being a vampire is terrifying, but you know what's more terrifying? The idea of telling you to leave, of going back to my life without you in it." Elion reached up slowly, cupping her face with one pale hand. "You're sure?" "No, I'm not sure about anything except that I don't want to lose you." He smiled, a real smile, rare and genuine. "That's enough." Julia leaned into his touch, then froze. "You're cold." "I'm technically dead, no body heat." "That's going to take some getting used to." But she didn't pull away. Instead, she reached up, covering his hand with hers. "Is this okay? Can I touch you?" "Please." She explored his face with careful fingers, tracing his too pale skin, the sharp lines of his features, the white of his hair. "You're beautiful. I thought so in the hospital, but I was too out of it to really process. But you're genuinely beautiful." "So are you." "I'm very ordinary." "You're human. You're alive. You have warmth and heartbeat and everything I lost centuries ago." His thumb brushed her cheek. "You're extraordinary to me." Julia rose on her toes and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. Elion froze for half a second, then responded, careful and controlled. She was so fragile, so breakable. He had to remember that. When they broke apart, Julia was smiling. Okay, we're doing this." "Are you certain?" "Absolutely not, but I'm doing it anyway." Over the next weeks, Elion introduced Julia to his world slowly. She met Lucian first, who was characteristically charming and formal, then Cassia, who studied Julia with shrewd eyes before declaring her acceptable. Other members of the court followed, each meeting carefully orchestrated to be non-threatening. Julia handled it with remarkable grace. She asked questions, listened carefully, and adapted to each new, impossible revelation. She learned about vampire politics, about the treaties that governed interactions between courts, about the careful balance that kept the vampire world hidden from most of humanity. "So you're basically running an immortal government," she said one night, curled against Elion's side on her couch. "Essentially. That sounds exhausting." "It has its moments. Do you ever take breaks?" "Not often." She tilted her head to look at him. "We should fix that. You should have hobbies, interests outside of court business." "I have you." "I'm not a hobby, I'm your girlfriend." She paused. "Am I your girlfriend? What's the vampire equivalent? Is there a different term?" "You're mine. That's the term that matters to me." "Possessive. Extremely. I should probably find that concerning." "But you don't." "No," she admitted. "I really don't." Things were good. Better than good. Elion found himself spending more time in Julia's apartment than in his own estate. He brought her to the underground court occasionally, showing her the grand halls and ancient architecture. She was fascinated by everything, asking endless questions about history and vampire culture. She also started accompanying him to neutral ground meetings with the other courts. It was a statement. Julia was his, and he wasn't hiding her. The reactions were mixed. The Crimson Assembly sent thinly veiled threats. The Obsidian Circle seemed amused. His own court accepted her presence with varying degrees of enthusiasm. But having Julia with him felt right in a way Elion hadn't anticipated. She grounded him, reminded him why he'd spent centuries fighting for coexistence rather than conquest. She made him better. 3 months into their relationship, the first real threat emerged. Elion was in a meeting with Crimson Assembly representatives negotiating yet another territorial dispute. Julia was home her apartment, surrounded by guards. Safe. Except she wasn't answering his texts. He'd sent her a message an hour ago, meeting running long. "We'll be there by midnight." No response. He'd tried again 30 minutes later. "Julia?" Nothing. The meeting dragged on, but Elion's attention was fragmenting. Something was wrong. He could feel it, a crawling unease that had nothing to do with the pompous vampire across the negotiation table and everything to do with Julia's silence. He interrupted the Crimson Assembly's ambassador mid-sentence. "We're done for tonight. Resume tomorrow." "We haven't reached an agreement." "Tomorrow." Elion was already moving, pulling out his phone. He called Julia. It rang once, then went to voicemail. He called the guards stationed around her building. No answer. "Lucian," he snapped into his phone. "Julia's not responding and neither are her guards. Send everyone." He drove too fast, barely keeping his speed within human normal ranges. Every second felt like an eternity. Julia was fine. She had to be fine. She was probably asleep, phone on silent, completely unaware of his panic. Except Julia always answered him, always, even if it was just to say she was busy. Elion reached her building in record time. The front door was ajar, lock broken. His heart would have stopped if it still functioned. He moved with vampire speed, taking the stairs in bounds, reaching her floor in seconds. Her apartment door was also broken, hanging crooked on its hinges. The lights were on, furniture was overturned, and the scent of vampire was everywhere, not his people but others, foreign scents that made rage ignite in his chest. "Julia!" He tore through the small space, checking every corner. She wasn't there. But there was blood on the floor, just a few drops and a phone smashed in the corner. Lucian arrived moments later with a dozen other vampires. "Sire." "Find her." Elion's voice was barely human. "Find who did this and find her now." "The guards?" "Dead or missing. Search the area. Someone saw something." His people scattered. Elion stood in Julia's destroyed apartment, fists clenched, mind racing. The other courts. This was retaliation, a message. The Crimson Assembly or the Obsidian Circle had taken her to prove she was a weakness. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Elion answered. "Where is she?" "Your Majesty." The voice was male, cultured, faintly amused, so quick to assume the worst. "Who is this?" "Victor Thornwood. I don't believe we've been formally introduced, though I know my cousin Marius sits on your council." Elion went very still. The Thornwood line was old blood, powerful, and they'd been agitating for more traditional vampire policies for decades. Marius was annoying but manageable. Victor, on the other hand, had been banned from the Midnight Court 50 years ago for excessive violence. If you've harmed her, she's unharmed for now. I'm simply making a point, which is that loving a human makes you weak, that your progressive policies endanger our kind, that perhaps it's time for new leadership in the Midnight Court. Where is she? Somewhere safe, somewhere we can have a proper conversation about the future of our kind. Come alone to the old cathedral on the north side. You have 1 hour. The line went dead. Elion stood frozen for 3 seconds, then he was moving. Lucian caught his arm. It's obviously a trap. I don't care. If you go alone, they'll kill you both. If I don't, they'll kill her anyway. Elion pulled free. Follow at a distance, but don't interfere unless I signal. Sire. That's an order. The old cathedral was a ruin on the edge of the city, abandoned decades ago. Elion approached it exactly 59 minutes after the call, moving through the broken front doors into a space gutted by time and neglect. Victor Thornwood stood in the center of what used to be the nave, white hair gleaming in the moonlight that streamed through the broken roof. He wasn't alone. A half-dozen vampires flanked him, and in the center of their circle, bound to a pillar, was Julia. She was conscious, eyes wide with fear but also defiance. When she saw Elion, relief flooded her features. Don't make a deal with them. Whatever they want, don't... One of Victor's people clamped a hand over her mouth. Elion felt something dark and violent surge in his chest. Let her go, he said softly. Not yet. First we talk. Victor gestured around the ruined cathedral. Appropriate setting, don't you think? The old world crumbling around us just like your outdated ideals. You've made your point. You've demonstrated that I have a vulnerability. Now, release her and we'll discuss your grievances through proper channels. Proper channels. Victor laughed. You sound like a bureaucrat, not a vampire king. That's the problem, Elion. You've become soft, weak. You care more about maintaining peace with humans than about our kind's supremacy. Supremacy is a fool's goal. Coexistence is sustainable. Dominance invites war. War. Victor's smile sharpened. Perhaps that's what we need. A reminder of what we are. Predators, not politicians. Is that what this is about? You want war with humanity? They outnumber us millions to 1. Modern weapons would devastate our population. War would be extinction. Or it would be glorious. Victor moved closer to Julia, and Elion had to physically restrain himself from attacking. But I'm not unreasonable. I'm willing to compromise. Step down. Let Marius take leadership of the Midnight Court. We'll implement more traditional policies, and the human goes free. And if I refuse? Then she dies, and you'll be weakened by grief, making the eventual coup much easier. Elion looked at Julia. She was shaking her head frantically, trying to speak around the hand covering her mouth. She didn't want him to negotiate. She'd rather die than have him surrender his position, his principles, because of her, which was exactly why he loved her. Counter-proposal, Elion said quietly. I'm listening. Trial by combat, old law. You challenge me directly, no proxies, no hostages. If you win, you take the Midnight Court and everything that comes with it. If I win, you and your people leave London and never threaten what's mine again. Victor considered. Accepted. But the human stays bound until we're finished. Insurance. She remains unharmed. Agreed. They moved to opposite ends of the cathedral. Elion could sense Lucian and the others outside, waiting. He caught Lucian's mind. Vampires could communicate telepathically when bonded by blood and sent a single command. No matter what happens, get Julia out safely. Then Victor attacked. Vampire combat was brutal and fast. They moved faster than human eyes could track, exchanging blows that would have shattered mortal bones. Victor was strong, old, and skilled, but Elion was older, stronger. And he was fighting for something Victor couldn't understand. He was fighting for the possibility of love, for the fragile, impossible connection he'd found with a human woman, for the future he wanted rather than the past Victor clung to. Elion caught Victor's arm mid-swing and twisted. Bones snapped. Victor snarled, using his other hand to slash at Elion's throat. Vampire claws, retractable like fangs, left burning lines across Elion's neck. He barely felt it. They grappled, crashed through a remaining pew, rolled across the stone floor. Victor was fast, but Elion was faster. Victor was vicious, but Elion was desperate. Finally, Elion got behind Victor, arm around his throat. It wouldn't kill him, vampires didn't breathe, but it gave Elion leverage. He pulled Victor's head back, exposing his throat. "Yield," Elion growled. "Never. Then die." He could do it. Should do it, probably. Victor would continue to be a threat, would continue undermining his policies, endangering his people and Julia. Killing him would solve so many problems. But it would also make him the thing Victor accused him of abandoning. A monster. "Last chance," Elion said. Victor said nothing. Elion met Julia's eyes across the cathedral. She was watching him, and something in her gaze steadied him. She knew what he was. She'd seen his violence, his inhuman nature, and she was still looking at him with trust. Elion released Victor, shoving him forward. "You're exiled, permanently, you and anyone who supported this coup. Leave London by dawn or face execution." Victor sprawled on the stone floor, breathing hard despite not needing to. "You're weak. I'm strong enough to show mercy. That's a strength you'll never understand." Elion turned to Victor's followers. "Anyone else want to challenge me?" Silence. One by one, they lowered their eyes. "Get out," Elion said softly. "All of you." They fled. Elion crossed to Julia immediately, tearing through the ropes that bound her with his bare hands. She collapsed against him, and he caught her, cradling her against his chest. You're okay. I have you. You're safe." "You didn't kill him." Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. "You could have, but you didn't." "No. Why?" "Because you were watching. Because I don't want to be the monster when you look at me." Julia pulled back, framing his face with her hands. "You're not a monster. You're the man who texts me good morning every day, who reads my rambling messages about difficult customers, who came to the hospital when I was hurt. You're Elion, and you're good." He kissed her then, hard and desperate, reassuring himself she was real and alive and his. When they broke apart, Julia was smiling despite the tears on her face. "Can we go home now? Because I've had a very stressful evening." "Yes, we're going home." Lucian and the others had entered the cathedral. They surrounded Elion and Julia, a protective formation as they left the ruin. The drive back was silent except for Julia's hand in Elion's, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. At her apartment door, already repaired, guards doubled. Julia stopped him before he could enter. "I can't stay here." Elion's chest tightened. "You're leaving?" "No, you idiot. I mean, I can't stay in this apartment. It's compromised. They found me here. They could find me again. I'll increase security. Or I could stay with you, at your place, the underground estate with all the vampire security and reinforced everything." She looked up at him. "If you want me there. I don't want to assume." "Want her there?" Elion almost laughed. "I want you everywhere, always." "That's a yes?" "That's an absolutely yes." They packed her essentials that night. Julia moved into Elion's estate, into rooms that had been empty for centuries. She brought color and warmth and life into spaces that had felt like beautiful tombs. The midnight court accepted her presence with surprising ease. She became a fixture at court functions, charming vampires who'd never thought they'd take orders from someone who spoke with respect toward a human. She sat beside Elion during council meetings, offering perspectives he'd never considered. She made him better at his job and better as a person. Months passed. The Crimson Assembly stopped pushing boundaries. The Obsidian Circle sent a formal acknowledgement of Julia as Elion's consort, which in vampire politics was essentially a peace offering. Victor and his followers had fled to the continent and stayed there. Things were stable. Good. Elion had never been happier in his long existence. One night, as they lay together in their bed, Julia propped herself up on one elbow. "I have a question." "Ask." "Can you turn humans into vampires?" Elion went very still. "Yes." "Would you turn me?" The question landed like a physical blow. Elion sat up, putting space between them. "Julia, I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm just asking if it's possible, if it's something you'd consider." "It's possible." But it's not a decision to make lightly. Being turned is painful. And you'd lose the sun, the ability to have children, the chance to grow old naturally. You'd be committing to eternity, or at least as close to it as exists. I know. I've been researching, reading every book in your library about vampire transformation. She moved closer, taking his hand. I'm 26. Elion, I have maybe 60 more years if I'm lucky. You have forever. I don't want to spend 60 years with you and leave you alone again. I don't want to age while you stay young. I don't want the time limit. You'd be giving up your humanity. I'd be choosing you. There's a difference. Elion closed his eyes. I don't want you to make this choice because you feel pressured, because you think it's what I want. Is it what you want? Yes. The admission came out raw. Selfishly, impossibly, yes, I want you with me for as long as existence lasts. But I also want you to have the life you deserve, the human experiences, the normalcy. I've never been normal, and I've never wanted normal. I want adventure and impossibility in you. Julia squeezed his hand. But I'm not asking you to turn me tonight. I'm asking if it's something you'd be willing to do someday. If I still wanted a year from now, 2 years, 5. If you're certain, truly certain, then yes, I would turn you. I would give you eternity if you asked for it. She smiled and kissed him softly. That's all I needed to know. 2 years later, Julia made her decision final. She'd experienced human life, traveled, reconnected with distant family. She'd made peace with the choice. The turning was as painful as Elion had warned, but he stayed with her through every moment. When she woke 3 days later with crimson eyes and vampire strength, her first words were, "So this is what you see. Everything is so clear. How do you feel?" Powerful, hungry, and really, really glad I don't have to work night shifts at diners anymore. Elion laughed, actual genuine laughter, and pulled her into his arms. They had problems, still. Vampire politics never fully settled. There were always territories to negotiate, disputes to mediate, threats to manage, but they faced them together. Julia became his partner in every sense. She sat beside him at council meetings, co-ruled the midnight court with wisdom that surprised the oldest vampires, and championed policies that strengthened human-vampire relations. She was beloved by their people and feared by their enemies. And every night, before they slept, Elion would pull out his phone and read that old message. "Goodnight, I think I'm falling asleep." "Why do you keep that?" Julia asked once, noticing. "Because it's where this began, where you trusted me enough to fall asleep thinking of me. It was the moment I knew I was lost." She smiled and snuggled closer. "You read it 1,000 times, didn't you? That first night." "More. I never stopped counting after 1,000. Obsessive. Completely. I love you too." Decades passed, then centuries. The world changed around them. Vampire-human relations evolved, became more open, more integrated. The Midnight Court led the way, with Elion and Julia as its foundation. They built a life that was both impossible and perfect. They traveled the world. They read books together in the library. They still texted each other during the rare moments they were apart, though now Julia's messages were just as concise as Elion's. "Miss you," she'd text from across the estate. "Come home. I'm in the other wing, not another continent, still too far." And she'd laugh and return to him always. 300 years after that incomplete text message, after Julia's turning, after countless nights together, Elion found himself sitting in their study, phone in hand. Julia walked in, silver-haired now by choice, though she could have stayed dark-haired forever, beautiful and eternal and his. "What are you doing?" "Reading an old message." She came to look over his shoulder, then smiled. "You still have that?" "Always. I was falling asleep." That's how the sentence was supposed to end. "I know, but I prefer the incomplete version." "Why?" "Because it's more honest. You weren't just falling asleep. You were falling for me, just as I was falling for you." He set down the phone and pulled her into his lap. "The unfinished message is perfect, because what we have isn't finished either. It keeps going, keeps growing." Julia kissed him, soft and sweet and home. "That might be the most words you've ever said at once. You inspire me." "Good. Because I plan to keep inspiring you for a few more centuries at least." "At least," Elion agreed. And somewhere in the modern London night, in an estate hidden beneath the city, a vampire king and his queen held each other close, their story ongoing, their love eternal, their incomplete sentence finally finished by a lifetime, several lifetimes of happiness. The message stayed saved in Elion's phone, a reminder of where they began. "Good night, I think I'm falling asleep." But now they both knew how it ended, not with sleep, but with love. Not with distance, but with presence. Not with an incomplete sentence, but with a complete life built together, word by careful word, night by eternal night, forever